Thank you very much, Jeff, for your kind words of introduction, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored and delighted to speak to you today in the role of a Dehejia Fellow. When Sunitha, my wife, was here with me, and I met Mac and Ursula, this was in Mysore, India, last year. Mac shared the story of his son in India, and it was very moving, touching, and in its own way an inspiration to me. I'll explain why. Of course, Anindya's untimely death was at the time when we heard, when he was just near to make some really innovative scientific discoveries in molecular genetics relating to Parkinson's disease. He was also one of the 19 authors of the first human genome map, a physical map of 30,000 genes published in Science in 1998. These and many others are outstanding achievements, and they give to me, as a South Asian, as a member of the South Asian diaspora community, a great sense of pride. Now, the Dehejias are also members of the South Asian diaspora community. South Asia, to explain the term, because even though it has been in circulation for many years, it's still relatively some circles. It comprises the 7, and in fact now 8 countries in South Asia, members of the South Asian Regional Council: India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, the Maldives Islands, and lately Afghanistan. There are over 20 million South Asians who have migrated to live outside South Asia. The United Kingdom alone, we have 1.5 million, and here in the United States, 2 million. And what's interesting, by the way, is when I came to the United States about 10, 12 years ago, the statistic was quoted as 1 million. It's doubled. Diaspora South Asians have an estimated disposable income of over $100 billion. They're a significant economic entity in the countries they have settled in and in their countries of origin. Take Silicon Valley in the United States, and that alone is a prime example of South Asian contribution to competitiveness of the UK economy. I'll never forget, I go off my notes because I make that comment. I said I won't go off my notes, but I will. So you'll have to put up with this when you compare it against the text that may be circulated. Ross Perot, when I met him in England, and we had a chat, you know, he said to me, I'm just fascinated by the genes, by the neurons of South Asians. He said, I took 100 of my key South Asian employees in Silicon Valley and spent a weekend with them to try and unpack and understand what makes them so good at math. He just said it was extraordinary for him. So it's fascinating that he picked it up already in his days at EDS, building one of the largest software companies. Now, in the United States, of course, there are many different diasporas. And it's fascinating for me, looking from the outside in, to see the amazing diversity reflected in U.S. society. The Chinese diaspora, the Iranian diaspora, and many more. I could make a list that reflects almost every country of the world in terms of diasporas in the United States. And today I've had the privilege and honor sitting through some classes here at Sidwell, and it's been just wonderful. The very first class, each student introduced themselves, and I sat in, and I said, you know, there are 16 students. There may be almost that many nationalities by origin. Now, they wouldn't see that. You know, they're all students at the school. They don't see those differences. But I'm from the outside and looking in. And you know, what better preparation could there be for young people? Service and success in the increasingly global society that we belong to. Now, my remarks this afternoon will be from a very personal South Asian perspective, a British South Asian perspective at that. And it's interesting, I made that point at one of the classes I sat in. I'll tell you the classes I sat in. The first one was with Jim Senger, the history of the modern Middle East. And it was fascinating to be sitting in on a class that was looking at the whole issue of the Prophet Muhammad, the Islamic history, and the roots of the whole the Middle Eastern history. And of course, I went to a Muslim school. So I was pretty sort of it was pretty good to be reminded of myself of the history that I'd learned. And so I sat in through that class. Then I gave a class to the 9th grade, the West and the World. You can ask them whether it went well or not. I enjoyed it. And then I sat in on the history of the United States with Steve Steinbach, and that was grades 11 and 12. And it was interesting sitting in on that class to see how what you call the War of Independence, when I was taught, America called the Revolution, you know, and it reminded me like of the Indian Mutiny of 1857. We learn it as the Indian War of Independence. In Britain, it is the Mutiny. So you get perspectives, don't you, and different perspectives on all historical facts. But therefore, I stress it is from a UK, British South Asian perspective, and it would be interesting if you have a few moments of question and answer time to see whether some of these experiences overlap or they're different. It's always good to share experiences. Now, my own family, we arrived in London as refugees after our expulsion from East Africa, following independence from Britain. Now, you know, I come from the Sindhi community, and the Sindhis are known as traders. They're a certain part of what is now in Pakistan, but which was part of British India. And after partition, our family already lost everything at that point because of partition. We started life again in East Africa. Then came and built up a successful business, and then came to Britain as almost penniless. A humiliating climb down for the whole family, who had run a prestigious West, almost equivalent of downtown large store, and now running a shop. Streets. I mean, I loved it as a 16-year-old, so I could not see the climb down of the humiliation. But I felt for my father and the elders in the family who had to cope with their peer group. So a huge drop. 15 of us had to sleep in 4 bedrooms, which was above the shop, and I had 3 other brothers who shared the room with me. And you know, one thing I remember, father refused to take any state handouts or charity. He says, no, we will work. And that ethic was drilled into us. We did work. And, you know, retaining human dignity and pride is so important. And, you know, we can now look back as a family and proudly see the contribution that British South Asians have made to UK competitiveness. But with all that talk of a positive contribution and everything, we were part of a migration, a forced migration albeit. There is economic migration. How is migration being seen within the Western world? Negative. You've got to look at the media headlines and just look at newspaper headlines in the United Kingdom, but I see them as well within the United States. There's a real issue. Immigration is a hot topic. The Democratic presidential candidate Barack Obama to Europe recently, and I caught his speech in Berlin, which was during July. And he's quoting from his speech, new walls could divide. In front of the Victory column, which is not far from where the Berlin Wall once stood, he said, quote, the greatest danger of all is to allow new walls to divide us from one another. He warned of walls between races, walls between rich and poor, natives and immigrants, and Christians, Muslims, and Jews. These now are the walls we must tear down. And a number of people in the crowd, which began gathering hours earlier, waved American flags. Many shouted Obama's campaign slogan, which is, yes, we can. It was fascinating to see that happening in a European context. You just watch it and you think, wow, is this real? But it did happen, I assure you. And again, within the United States, I updated this already from February when I was due to give this lecture before it got snowed off. I just picked this up from the U.S. Census Bureau. They project that whites now, 96% of the population, will make up less than half the total in 2042.